Hello neighbor, I'm Robert Burns, and it is such a delight to be back with you, hoping everyone has enjoyed a very happy holiday season. This is between Christmas and New Year's, so we're wrapping up 2016, getting ready for 2017, and what an eventful year it has been. Just prior to these holidays commencing, of course, the most noteworthy news was the FBI raid on Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards' the brother of John Bel Edwards at the Tangipahoa Parish Sheriff's Office. And it'll just remain to be seen as to just how far that probe from the FBI may extend, but I think common sense would tell you that when they go in with 100 agents and they say, get out of the way, we're taking your computer, that being the computer of Daniel Edwards, the sheriff of Tangipahoa Parish and the brother of Governor John Bel Edwards, you can figure that they're probably not there just to snoop around and see if there's a few video games on the computer. And that takes me to our session today, or our sound off feature for today. And by the way, this will also be another installment in the continuing education series for auctioneers in the state of Louisiana. And we're going to be talking about the continued flaunting of the honor code of Governor John Bel Edwards, and specifically focusing in on some more problematic activity with regard to one of his auction licensees board appointees, specifically Jeff Henderson. Now what we're going to be focusing in on today has to deal with a company called the Lottie Group, as well as Henderson Auctions itself. The Lottie Group was an entity that was formed immediately after Hurricane Katrina. As many of you will recall, there were numerous FEMA trailers that the federal government had purchased and needed to dispose of after Hurricane Katrina, and there was a joint venture formed between Henderson Auctions, which is JAH Enterprises, and the Lottie Group for the sale of these FEMA trailers. Now, that whole process took about 3.5 years. It was staggered over quite an extended period of time. It involved even some auctioneers from out of state. Mr. Easler, we told you about in a previous video, from the state of South Carolina, assisted with the effort. But today we're going to focus in on a little incident that transpired with regard to this in the Lottie Group and JAH Enterprises, and that being that Jeff Henderson has sued his bank. Actually, the Lottie Group / Henderson Auctions has sued their lender, First Guaranty Bank, and they are alleging that First Guaranty Bank, and we're going to give you a link for the lawsuit, and they are alleging that First Guaranty Bank failed to provide adequate safeguards and thereby enabled internet wire transfers to take place that were unauthorized and fraudulent that totaled nearly $1 million. And we have the 6 itemized wire transfers that are the subject matter of the lawsuit. We have those highlighted for you on the page. And as part of the continuing education for auctioneers, look, if you are going to engage in wire transfers pertaining to your business, you need to be really careful about whom you would provide access to your username and password, because if you'll focus in, and one of the second links that we provide you is the answer that First Guaranty has provided, and they have asserted some 20-something defenses, not the least of which that this lawsuit appears not to have been filed timely, waiting way beyond the 1-year prescription period. These losses took place, or alleged losses took place, in 2011. The lawsuit was not filed for quite some time later, but I want to focus in on the 12th defense, that they have asserted in that, and we have a direct link to you for that one defense that a First Guaranty Bank has asserted to the lawsuit. It is a blown up copy, and I'm going to put it in front of the camera here. Put it right here in front of the camera. Now bear in mind, this is not me saying this about Jeff Henderson and the operations of Henderson Auctions. I hope the whole thing's visible there. There we go. So let's just read it off. 12th defense. Plaintiffs are the cause of any loss they have suffered due to their negligence inattention, failure to investigate, lack of review, lack of management, and/or lack of supervision of the operations of Henderson Auctions and the Lottie Group, including the actions of its members. Well, the key member involved there is none other than Jeff Henderson, the appointee of Governor John Bel Edwards to the Auctioneers Licensing Board. And I'll just say this, some of you, I have said it several times that I was a fraud examiner for the federal government, specifically the FDIC. During the early 90s, I am very familiar with First Guaranty Bank. The bank is owned by a gentleman named Marshall Reynolds. Mr. Reynolds hails from the state of West Virginia. And I'll just say he grew up under the school of hard knocks. He has made a name for himself. He bought First Guaranty Bank in the early 90s, mainly because at a time when banks were failing, including First Guaranty Bank being on the verge of collapse, he happened to have $16.5 million laying around that he could vest into this bank. And at the time, I believe, First Guaranty Bank was around a $70 or $80 million bank. Today it is in excess of $1 billion in assets or thereabouts. And this is not the only bank that Mr. Reynolds has. So let me just say this. You have jumped into the pond with the big fish, Mr. Henderson. And if you have ever felt like that you've never met your match, I'm here to tell you, you've met your match with Marshall Reynolds, okay? And that gets us to a pattern that you're seeing here with regard to Henderson Auctions, and that is that they will go in guns a-blazing into court and assert certain things. As you can see, First Guaranty intends to vigorously defend this lawsuit with 20-something defenses, not the least of which is the 12th defense that I just read to you. But we've seen this pattern going on repeatedly. I mentioned to you the Charles Easler lawsuit. Therein, we had an episode of continuing education. The Hendersons assert that he auctioned off this equipment, and they had advanced the proceeds to buy the equipment, and then they remitted the funds, and then they said, hey, look, we need to get a good bit of that money back. Well, in that continuing education series, we talked about, wouldn't it be a wise idea to withhold the proceeds of the loan and only remit the net balance? Yes, that did cause a few auctioneers to ask me, does Jeff Henderson have walking around sense? And I truthfully responded, I don't know. But I can tell you that the more logical technique to use here is to withhold those loan proceeds, all right, and only remit the net balance. If First Guaranty's assertions in their defense are accurate here, apparently there was some sloppiness of not safeguarding the username and password, because clearly that's what they are alleging, is that you permitted someone or some people to utilize, they were able to facilitate these internet transfers due to the reasons that I itemized off, lack of supervision, and so. It was all itemized in that 12th defense. But at any rate, Mr. Henderson is finding it quite a bit more difficult as they storm into court, and typically they will do this in Livingston Parish, because we all know that Marvin Henderson, who has readily bragged that even the Department of Revenue doesn't have guts enough to try me in Livingston Parish. And as many of you have been following the James Blake Everett litigation, they certainly stormed into Livingston Parish Court, asserting that basically there had been some improprieties with regard to the sale of the Crown Casino. And specifically, they wanted to say that approximately $200,000 had been withheld by Mr. Everett, and Mr. Everett said, I did no such thing, and said, would you like to know where the $200,000 went? And they said, of course we would. And well, it was a little bit, I guess, somewhat embarrassing embarrassing to Jeff Henderson when it was revealed that the $200,000 went to Yo Daddy, Marvin Henderson, causing them to have to completely rewrite the lawsuit that they have against Mr. Everett. Of course, Mr. Everett denies all of this and is vigorously claiming that they owe him money. But the little technique of going into Livingston Parish Court did not work. That was transferred into the Middle District of Louisiana. And the trial date, by the way, I haven't provided any updates of late because there's not been a tremendous amount going on in that litigation. However, I will say this, the trial date has been pushed back to January the 8th of 2018. January the 8th of 2018. Now, I do want to say one thing with regard to that litigation. The Hendersons added a gentleman named Nick Clark, an auctioneer from Mississippi, into the litigation. We talked about diversity of citizenship. When you have folks from multiple states, that's how Mr. Everett was able to get it transferred to federal court, because the defendants reside in Mississippi, the plaintiffs reside in Louisiana. Therefore, it was taken over to the Middle District of Louisiana to have the jurisdiction. Smart little move on Mr. Everett's part to avoid the little home cooking that Mr. Henderson, Marvin that is, has so been none too hesitant to brag on that would go on in Livingston Parish. But at any rate, I want to first of all, well, Nick Clark has been released from this lawsuit. That happened on November the 30th. Magistrate Judge Richard Bourgeois signed the order dismissing him, and we'll provide you with a link for that dismissal. But I want to just state the utter absurdity of what they had to allege against Mr. Clark to even drag him into the litigation in the first place. Now, the cutoff is $75,000 for having jurisdiction in federal court. And basically, the proceeds of the Ivy House in Mississippi were auctioned. They brought about $29,000. Well, common sense would tell you that that is significantly less than $75,000. So this is what they argued, okay? They basically said, Mr. Clark, look, you are a boneheaded auctioneer. If you had not auctioned off those proceeds separately and instead had kept the proceeds with the house and auctioned the house and the contents together, the house would have brought so much more money that would exceed $75,000. All right, you don't have to be an experienced licensed auctioneer to use some common sense to say, if I'm going to force you to bid on approximately $500,000 house in order to be able to qualify to bid on these antiques or the contents of the Ivy House, doesn't common sense dictate that is going to significantly constrain the number of bidders who can even participate in the auction? Yeah, you don't have to go to auction school to know that. Okay, it ought to be, it should be common sense. You would think that the attorneys would have been able to put two and two together, but that's how far of a reach they had to make in order to try to drag Nick Clark into the litigation. Not to mention that at the point he goes to conduct the auction, he is hit with a temporary restraining order to shut the whole auction of the house down. And I think common sense would dictate to you that most bidders would say, wow, sheriff showing up a restraining order, something's got to be wrong here. Imagine the implications for that upon the auctioneer. I mean, he had to read that into the announcements, all right? That's going to have a chilling effect on its own, all right? Here's a man just trying to go out and do an auction for his client, and just look what all happens, all right? Now, let's conclude this thing by just giving a synopsis of basically everything that exists with regard to Mr. Henderson, to give some idea of just how much of a flaunting of this honor code John Bell Edwards is making. Well, first of all, we have the fact that Marvin Henderson is a convicted felon entailing mail fraud for his auction operations, all right? Beyond that, we have the fact that he has been illegal, and Jeff Henderson has just sat by and let all of this transpire, okay? Yet honor code deems him fit to sit on the auctioneer's licensing board. We've got the felony conviction. Then we've got Marvin Henderson illegally running around representing himself as a notary, all right? When you are a convicted felon in the state of Louisiana, you cannot serve as a notary, all right? Then we have instances of Marvin Henderson openly saying that there should be shield bidding should be no problem. In fact, he has gone so far as to say, without it, my business would be shut down. We have the videos to links to show you that, and providing testimony in the House of Representatives before the Commerce Committee. We've got most recently Mr. Jeff Henderson having illegally permitted other auctioneers from out of state to conduct auctions with no Louisiana auction license. All of this information has been provided to the Edwards administration. So you've got the felony conviction, you've got the illegal notarizations, you've got the testimony about the shield bidding and advocating that it ought to be fine, which, by the way, is an illegal act. You've got permitting other auctioneers to come in and auction from your facility with no Louisiana auction license, which is a direct breach of Mr. Henderson's fiduciary duty to the other licensees of this state, okay? And we've got a direct link where you can see the confirmation that the $500 fine was paid for that incident. So, as we enter 2017, can you believe that it's not even been a year since we inaugurated Mr. John Bell Honor Code Edwards into office? And I mean, we have replete examples. We have a separate website, jbefraud.com. We'll be adding this as yet another entry, but look at what a mockery he is making of that campaign slogan that I don't steal, I don't lie, I don't steal, I do not lie, cheat, or steal, nor tolerate those who do. That is the honor code of West Point, and at this point, we're not even a year into this man having served in the governor's office, and he owes an apology to West Point for the open flaunting that he has done that is exhibited on that JBE Fraud website. And this is just one more example. Trust me, we got more to come. But I wanted to get this one on out to conclude the year. I hope everyone had a very Merry Christmas. I hope you have a Happy New Year. And we will be continuing to hold Mr. Honor Code accountable for the hypocrisy and the cronyism and the corruption that exist within his administration. Thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you in the year 2017. Thank you so much.